Here's a fully expanded version of Scene 1, written to reach around 1,000 words with rich detail and immersive storytelling. The wedding hall gleamed with opulence, every corner adorned with glimmering fairy lights, crystal chandeliers, and elegant floral arrangements. The air was thick with the scent of fresh roses, candles, and the subtle undertone of expensive perfume. Guests moved through the space with an air of practiced sophistication, clinking glasses of champagne and exchanging polite laughter that rang hollow against the backdrop of soft classical music. Everywhere, smiles sparkled and dresses shimmered, yet to Emma, the room felt like a stage designed solely for people who didn't exist in her world. She sat in a corner, perched on a chair slightly too small for her frame, feeling painfully out of place. Her deep sapphire gown had been chosen with care, meant to flatter her curves, to make her feel beautiful, but at this moment, it felt like armor she couldn't bear to wear. Her hands twisted the fabric in her lap nervously, fingers tugging at the folds as if she could somehow pull herself smaller, make herself vanish. Her stomach churned, and her heart pounded as her gaze darted around the room, seeking some way to escape the scrutiny she felt pressing down from every side. A group of women from her old high school appeared near the entrance, their laughter slicing through the music like a knife. They were dressed in the latest designer gowns, their hair perfectly styled, their nails polished to perfection. Emma's stomach sank as their eyes flicked in her direction. "Did you see what she's wearing?" One of them hissed, her voice dripping with judgment. "She actually thinks she can pull that off." Another added, smirking and tossing her hair back in a way that seemed choreographed for maximum effect. Emma's chest tightened, and she hunched over slightly, wishing she could disappear entirely. Every whispered giggle and pointed glance felt like a spotlight aimed directly at her, illuminating all the insecurities she had worked so hard to hide. She lowered her eyes to her hands, folded tightly in her lap, and tried to make herself as small as possible. Her thoughts swirled in a cruel loop. "I shouldn't have come. I don't belong here. They're all laughing at me. I can't even breathe without them noticing." The hall, which had seemed so magical when she arrived, now felt suffocating, as though the chandeliers themselves were mocking her reflection in the polished floors. It was then that a calm, commanding voice broke through the hum of whispers. "Excuse me." Emma looked up, startled, to see a man she hadn't noticed before. He was in his mid-30s, dressed in a tailored navy suit with a subtle silver tie, standing with a presence that seemed to draw attention without demanding it. But it wasn't his clothing that struck her, it was his eyes. They were steady, warm, and filled with a quiet understanding that immediately made the space around him feel less threatening. "I don't think they understand what it means to be human," he said softly, gesturing toward the group who had just passed. "Laughing at someone because of their size. That's not humor. That's cruelty." Emma blinked, uncertain whether she should feel relief, embarrassment, or disbelief. The words were simple, but they carried a weight she hadn't expected. "My name's Daniel," he continued, sliding into the chair across from her as if he had always belonged there. "And I see a lot more in you than they ever will. You have courage, you have beauty, real beauty. The kind that doesn't fit into their tiny boxes." Emma felt a tear prick her eye. "But, they're so loud. Everyone's staring. I can feel it in every glance." Daniel smiled, the kind of smile that didn't belittle her fear but acknowledged it and gently diffused it. "Let them stare. Let them talk. You're not here for them, you're here for yourself. And tonight, you're not alone." He reached out and lightly touched her hand, a gesture that was neither patronizing nor romantic, but simply human. "I see you. You are not invisible." That simple act sent a warmth through her that she hadn't realized she had been craving. From somewhere across the room, a waiter carrying a tray of champagne misstepped, and the glasses crashed to the floor with a dramatic clatter. Gasps rose from nearby tables. The women who had been whispering and pointing at Emma froze mid-laugh, their attention captured by the sudden disruption. Daniel rose, his presence commanding, but without raising his voice. "Perhaps next time, think twice before mocking someone," he said. His gaze swept over the hall, landing on the group of women who were now awkwardly shifting from foot to foot. "Your laughter is not more important than someone else's dignity." The effect was immediate. The women's faces flushed, the confidence they had worn like a crown fading in an instant. Whispers of embarrassment replaced their earlier snickers. Emma, meanwhile, felt something inside her shift. For the first time that evening, she felt a spark of courage. She realized that perhaps she didn't need to shrink away or disappear to survive in this room. Daniel returned to his seat, still holding her gaze with a quiet strength. "You're not alone," he said softly. "People like them, they thrive on the fear and insecurity of others. But that doesn't define you. Their words, their laughter, it's meaningless compared to who you truly are. Emma's lips trembled, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. I've never had someone stand up for me like this before, she whispered. You deserve it, he said simply, as though it were the most obvious truth in the world. Everyone does. The group of women eventually melted back into the crowd, their snickers replaced by an uneasy silence. The hall returned to its soft, musical hum, but Emma no longer felt trapped in the shadows. She breathed deeply, feeling a strange strength rising within her. Tonight, she was no longer just the girl they laughed at, she was someone worthy of being seen, recognized, and defended. Daniel stayed with her, a steady presence, a reminder that courage and kindness could exist even in a room full of judgment. For Emma, it was the first time she realized that protection and support could arrive in the quietest, most unexpected ways, and that sometimes, a single person standing up for you could change everything. She lifted her chin, straightening her back, and allowed herself a small smile. She could still feel the occasional glance, the whispers brushing past like wind, but they no longer had power over her. The warmth that had begun in her chest spread, blooming into confidence. Tonight, Emma was not invisible. Tonight, she mattered. If you want, I can now expand scene 2 to 1,000 words in the same detailed, cinematic style so the story is fully immersive. Do you want me to do that next? Here's an expanded version of scene 2, written to reach approximately 1,000 words in a fully immersive style. The music shifted to a slow, melodic tune, soft and tender, the kind that made the room feel smaller and more intimate despite the grand chandeliers and polished marble floors. Emma felt a lightness she hadn't known she could feel in years. Daniel stayed at her side, a steady presence, and somehow that made the entire hall feel less intimidating. She walked with him past tables where guests murmured among themselves, still processing the earlier confrontation, but their glances no longer carried malice. They were silent observers now, witnessing a quiet strength they hadn't expected to see. You know, Daniel said gently, keeping his voice low so only Emma could hear, I was a single dad for a long time before my daughter grew up. She taught me something important: people who mock others are usually hurting inside. It doesn't excuse them, but it does mean we don't have to let it touch us personally. Emma glanced at him, startled by how natural and unforced his presence was. I've never had anyone explain it like that. I've always thought I had to hide, to disappear, to avoid being noticed. Daniel shook his head. No, you don't have to shrink yourself to fit someone else's comfort. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to be seen. And most importantly, you deserve to be treated with kindness, without having to beg for it. They reached the center of the room just as the slow song began in earnest. Daniel extended his hand, a simple gesture that carried no pressure, no expectation, only an invitation. Emma hesitated for a brief second, her nerves still flickering from the earlier embarrassment, but the warmth of his hand felt safe. She placed her hand in his, letting him guide her to the center of the dance floor. For a moment, she felt the eyes of the room on her again, but this time, it was different. The judgment, the sneers, the cruel laughter, they all felt distant, almost irrelevant. The people who had mocked her earlier had gone silent, some shifting uncomfortably, unsure how to act now that the girl they had ridiculed was standing tall, radiant, and undeniably confident. Daniel's presence beside her was grounding. He didn't crowd her, didn't force her into an awkward spotlight. Instead, he matched her pace, mirrored her movements, and somehow made the dance floor feel like a private space, a bubble where no one else's opinions mattered. Emma felt her shoulders relax for the first time that night. She lifted her chin, allowing herself to meet Daniel's eyes, and in them, she saw an unwavering belief in her worth that she had long denied herself. You're doing beautifully, he whispered softly, his voice carrying a warmth that made her cheeks flush. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Emma's lips curved into a genuine smile, a soundless laugh escaping her throat. She realized that she hadn't felt this alive, this free, in years. The ballroom, once a place of fear and judgment, now felt vibrant with possibility. She could move, breathe, and exist without apology. She could even enjoy herself. As they swayed gently to the music, Daniel leaned slightly closer, not to intrude, but to offer a sense of quiet support. You know, he murmured, sometimes we meet people who remind us of who we are, or who we could be. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to stand with us to see the world differently. Emma's eyes glistened, tears threatening to spill, but this time they weren't tears of shame, they were tears of relief, of recognition, of self-worth finally blooming. She realized she had been walking through life expecting ridicule, assuming that her presence would invite scorn. But now, standing here, she understood that those assumptions had been lies, and she had the power to discard them. The guests around them began to notice the transformation. Conversations paused, eyes turned, and a ripple of awe passed through the room. The girls who had mocked Emma earlier shrank into the background, their confidence evaporated, replaced by shame and disbelief. They had expected her to shrink, to cower, to apologize silently for daring to exist. Instead, she glowed with a quiet strength, her beauty undeniable and her confidence magnetic. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music guide her movements. She felt the fabric of her dress glide against her skin, the warmth of Daniel's hand in hers, the pulse of the floor beneath her feet. It was as if the world had shifted, revealing a space where she belonged entirely. She realized that for the first time, she didn't need the approval of anyone who had ever belittled her. She only needed to trust herself, to embrace her own worth. As the song neared its end, Daniel gently guided her into a graceful turn, his movements calm and reassuring. Emma felt a surge of joy, unfiltered and unexpected, rising in her chest. When the music faded, they were still at the center of the dance floor, and for a heartbeat, the world around them seemed to hold its breath. The whispers and sideways glances that had once tormented her had no power anymore. "You're unforgettable," Daniel said quietly, leaning just enough to let his words reach her, without breaking the bubble of safety he had created around them. Emma laughed, a soft, pure, and joyful sound that echoed across the hall. It was a sound that surprised even her, a sound she hadn't heard in years. And as she met Daniel's eyes, she realized that she believed it. For the first time in a long time, she truly believed she was unforgettable. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of light and music, but Emma felt herself different, transformed in ways that went far beyond the surface. Every smile she exchanged with Daniel, every conversation she joined, carried the weight of newfound confidence. She no longer shrank from the room, she filled it, in her own quiet, dignified way. By the time the night drew to a close, Emma had learned something profound. She didn't need to hide from the judgment of others. She didn't need to wait for validation from strangers or former acquaintances. With courage, kindness, and the presence of someone who truly saw her, she could claim her space in the world, unapologetically and proudly. And as she stepped away from the dance floor, Daniel's hand lingering briefly in hers, she knew that this was not just a night of survival, it was a night of awakening. She had been seen, defended, and celebrated, and in that moment, Emma felt a sense of power she had never known. She was no longer the girl who feared the world, she was a woman who could face it, unafraid, unashamed, and unforgettable. If you want, I can also create detailed image prompts for both Scene 1 and Scene 2, so you could generate stunning illustrations that capture the emotions and drama visually. Do you want me to do that next?